For those who are not able to attend today, feel free to book on any of the future meetings. We welcome anybody, external and internal, to Community Rail Network. Please feel free to join us. And if you are unable to attend on the day any of the webinars, please do try and catch up after the event. You can visit the Community Rail Network website through the members' services, and you will find a past event materials link where you can view the recording. Okay, so admin done. I have pleasure of passing over to Steve Booth from Purbeck CRP to tell us a little bit more about their project. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Gary. Well, hello, everybody. I'm just going to share my screen, and then we can sort of get going. Hopefully, everyone can see that.
Yes, Steve, at the moment it is in your view. If you can make that slideshow view, then we'll be able to see it a little bit clearer.
It's coming. Okay.
Perfect.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Well, I'm Stephen Booth, the Community Rail Officer for Purbeck. We're quite a small CRP. We operate from Dorchester up to Halton Heath, which is near Poole, and we have the privilege of the Heritage Railway, Swanage Railway, which is currently operating from Northern to Swanage, which is what you can see on the picture there. I mean, what is really interesting, we're very small, we haven't got much resource, but we've got such a beautiful area and we've got a lot of assets to promote. So this is one of the reasons why we're doing what we're doing. We've got a fantastic fantastic area with lots of different attractions, both man-made and environmental. So this is something that we're keen to promote. We get lots of tourists and visitors, so that really does make a difference to the number of people traveling. It's not an issue about the number of people coming to the area. It's about getting them to use the transport, public transport, the train, and the connecting services. I mean, I mean, if you just look at some of these pictures, these are internationally renowned. We all know these locations. Lovely day when I went down there, Gary. But you know, this is the sort of thing that we're promoting, and so it speaks for itself. Now, the background to this is we've done several videos in the past, and one of them was last year, which was to do with promoting transport from Wareham railway station to RSB on, and then on to Purbeck Park, and then on to Swanage. But we were joining up with the buses, we were joining up with cycling. So it was all about trying to connect people with different forms of transport and giving them places to go and things to do. I mean, we had bike hire from Purbeck Park, and then we had barrel bike hire down at Knoll Beach to Studland, and then linking in with a chain ferry going across back to Bournemouth Station. So you're coming in at Wareham Station, you were taking the bus to RSB on. And for those of you who don't know RSB on, it's a very popular internationally renowned nature reserve, which has featured a lot on Springwatch in recent times. So that's the sort of those are the sort of destinations we're promoting. So this was the video that we made for that. Now, obviously, going on to what we're talking about today was the Dorchester video. This differs because the other ones were more aimed at tourists and visitors to the region, but this is more of an urban location. So we saw this as an opportunity to attract local people, attract people for short visits, day trips, that sort of thing, because it's a town location. So we wanted to promote this as an option for bringing people into the town. It's unique in the fact that it's got two stations. That's what makes it unique, and it serves two train operating companies, which is Great Western and South Western Rail. So this was bringing people in from the London, from the SWR route, and people from the Bristol area, Bath, to Dorchester West from that direction as well. So there's a potential for a lot of people visiting the town by rail. So that was part of the thinking behind this, and it was also to show how condensed and how easy it is to get around. I'm going to show you the video shortly, but just to give you some sort of idea as to what we were doing. I mean, this was a joint venture as well between two CRPs. It wasn't just Purbeck, it was South Wessex CRP as well. In fact, my colleague at Community Rail Officer is the person who actually was hosting the video, as it were, as you'll see. we're working in partnership, in collaboration to further our aims and bring people in and connecting services. The thing about Dorchester is everything's relatively in walking distance, and so that makes it easier to get around once you get here by rail. There's a lot of interest around the area. There's a lot of social activities you can do. So there's a big hospitality element to Dorchester. There's also lots of shops and things like that. So it appeals to different people. But one of the differences between this and previous ones is we're aiming this at sort of more younger, sort of upwardly mobile people who've got a bit more of a say on environmental issues and are keen to support sustainable transport. So it was aimed at that sort of market. We're appealing to day trips, weekend breaks, all sorts of different things, and social activity in the evening as well. We're providing customers with journey planning and opportunities, and we wanted to help generate income in the local economy, and we wanted to be able to, bring people in from the locations I've mentioned. Now, we're trying to influence behavioural change here, which is never easy. It's a difficult one. But what we found here what was quite nice is when we put this together, we found that a lot of people, local businesses that we feature in the video, were very keen to participate and supporting the sort of ideas that what we do. So we found that people were very receptive to what we were doing. So on that note, I'm going to see if I can do this video. I think I'll have to just stop sharing and then share again to get the video up. And then we'll go from there. Okay, well, just to sum up, this is this is just about the simplicity and the convenience, really, of using sustainable transport, and that's what the key message is that we're trying to get out there. So thank you for listening.
Thanks very much, Steve. That's brilliant. Great to see the video. The quality, it was a little bit jumpy. So for those of you who experienced it the same as mine, I'm sure we'll be able to share the link later on, and you can see the sort of the full unjumpy version, but I think what Steve showed us said did it justice. So thank you very much, Steve. Right, without further ado, I'll hand over to Dave Darnell from Friends of Brockenhurst Station.
Okay, well, again, I'll share if I can. So I'll try sharing my screen. If I can. Don't know whether you can see that.
Dave, it's all good. Just if you make it into presentation mode, it'll be a little bit bigger for us.
Okay.
Yeah, all good.
Okay, well, slightly different in that we are an adopter, not from the CRP, but from a professional viewpoint, I was involved in the railway till I retired, or in design of stations, and I was asked by the hospital Friends, as my capacity as chair of Friends of Brockenhurst Station, to look at station construction to serve the hospital. Now, that was easily said, and it's a bit like the amateurs looking at a professional thing. And we had a meeting with Network Rail and with South Western Railway, who serve the area. And of course, they're interested in demand and timetabling. And so really, we then took a step back. I suggested to take a step back and look at the demand for public transport, really, to the hospital, not just railway, but public transport. So we applied and got the grant from ISTF, from Gary, who was very helpful, and it was match funded by the Friends of Lymington Hospital. You can see the aim of the study was to identify the demand, not just from Brockenhurst Station, which is on the main line, Waterloo, again down to Bournemouth and on to Weymouth, but there's a link, a branch line, and it's welcome Alistair Mann from the branch line Friends. I see you on the call as well, Alistair, so I'm sure you have an interest in this as well. And we did actually liaise with them and say what we were doing. So we commissioned a study with a consultant. Context, where we are, there's Southampton. I think you might just be able to see my cursor. So Southampton here, the main line from Southampton, it comes down through Eastleigh past Southampton Airport Station into Southampton, and then through and along this route here, the Castlemaine Corkscrew, I think they called it, through Brockenhurst and Sway down to Bournemouth. From Brockenhurst, there is then a branch line down to Lymington, Lymington Town and Lymington Pier, where from the pier there's a ferry across to Yarmouth and the Isle of Wight. And the site, you'll see this red square here, is the location of the hospital, which is adjacent to the branch line. Just looking at the scope, you'll see the branch line running down here, hospital site. So it's a good location to actually put a station. My professional capacity have been involved in a lot of this, and it doesn't always work like that, whereas those promoting seem to think a station, great idea. Obviously, significant capital cost to that. Single access into the hospital site, but it's in a business park here. And there used to be a halt, a high level halt at this location. So you're coming into the park here, hospital here. There used to be a halt here, high level, which was disused or closed back in the early 2000s. And at that time, the hospital started to develop. At present, the hospital is served by an irregular bus service, one which comes from Southampton through through Lyndhurst, if you know the New Forest, bottleneck there, through Brockenhurst and down into Lymington, and it calls at a hospital. That's an hourly service, but for some reason at peak times when it is needed, it is a 2-hourly service, and I think that comes down to availability of buses. There's a college, and I think the use for that. So that's just something that we had in the back of our mind as well. The station, the intent for a station was to locate it here in Hospital Land, but coming on to it, the Network Rail and SWR have some reservations about that, not least of which is the cost, but also operation and the demand and the impact on timetabling. So going back to the demand, we then undertook a travel survey, both of staff and of visitors. And you'll see from this here, the red lines are the rail routes in the region. So you'll see the main route coming down from Waterloo, through Southampton, down, through Brockenhurst and along the south coast, with the branch line coming down here. There is then the link up to Salisbury, and there's a link across to Romsey from Eastleigh, and then the line, the West Country line down, I think, to Yeovil, and then the one over to Bath and Bristol. This then gives you an idea from the survey of where the staff are coming from. So in actual fact, there is a high concentration around here, but you'll see the other locations, it is not particularly well served by rail in these areas here. The bus service that I talked about is the yellow amberish line running down here and runs through the site, which is here, and down into Lymington, not to the pier where there's a connection across to the Isle of Wight. And then there is two very infrequent, they are bus services around the area, but there are perhaps 3 buses a day, and one of the services is only 3 times a week. It actually is not particularly well served because it doesn't tie in either with staff patterns or actually with the visitors. You'll see that it's very similar, is a pattern of where the visitors come from to the staff as well. And you can see superimposed the rail. There up here is Andover. There's a link here to the hospital. So there are a number of patients visiting from the Andover area as well, but similar sort of pattern to the staff and the responses. On the responses, it's something I'll come on to as some of the issues. We got a 32% response from 300 staff where emails were sent out or approached. Unfortunately, there are 600 staff working there during the week. Why only 300 went out? That was down to the hospital. One of the issues of covering the staff as well. In actual fact, I attended the staff during the survey period, and a lot of them had never seen the email. So that's one of the issues I'll raise a bit later. Of those staff, only 13% currently use a public transport, which is hardly surprising because it's not particularly well served. An analysis of potential mode shift, again, was quite disappointing in as much that there would only be between 3% to 14% would actually, or would increase, that number would increase by that amount with the implementation of BusLink, with a rail link, and 3 to 9% for a bus link. Similarly with the patients, again, we had some issues with interviewing patients, quite elderly, the patients attending. They were more stressed about getting to their interviews, weren't interested in being interviewed. And of those, only 4% use public transport. Again, hardly surprising because it's not particularly well served by public transport. And an analysis showed similar sort of uptake if you introduced a rail link or the better improved bus service. At present, as I mentioned, there's no real incentive to use the public transport. There's free parking at the time of the survey. There's a separate free staff car park. And I mentioned limited public transport accessibility. And again, there's a cost impact as well. Both patient and staff origins are not well served, as you've seen by the previous slides, by public transport. And the staff responses where they like the flexibility and convenience of being able to travel by car. One of the beauties, I suppose, of the hospital. Great hospital. I used it quite a lot myself, but it is underused. And that could possibly be because it is not well served by public transport. So those without cars can't get down there. And invariably, the patients are accompanied. So it would double the cost if you travel by public transport. In the future, there is a planned expansion of the hospital, which will increase patronage, potential for 7-day week outpatient service, and also, if you recall the previous slide, the proximity to the Isle of Wight. But the ferry is not served by public, it's served by rail, but you'd have to jump on the train, get a train to Lymington town, but Lymington town is not served frequently by bus service going to the hospital. So there's a lack of integration really across the whole area. And whilst I suppose the response on uptake for public transport was disappointing, what the study has done is actually thrown all these things up and got them all formally identified. So really, without any intervention, by really the hospital, and I point the finger a little bit at the hospital because there is such a demand for funding for public transport that we've got to demonstrate demand. And without the car parking, a push to promote public transport, then I can't imagine the public transport putting money into increasing the services. So it's the availability of free parking that has contributed to the lack of demand, disconnected journeys, the origins, habits and convenience among patients. It's convenient because you've got a car, there's no constraint on the use of the car. And again, traveling with friends and family, a lot of the people, the patients are accompanied to the hospital. They have to be. It's ophthalmic as well, so you can't be driving if you're a patient. And again, it's back to mobility. And again, normal one here, which I'm sure everybody experiences, is the perceptions of reliability and availability of bus services. And again, for the staff, none of the public transport aligns with the shift patterns. So there is a limited demand, which again was disappointing. And therefore, what we're recommending, there's got to be an intervention if the hospital are going to meet their aspiration of zero net carbon operations, and that includes the transport. So they've got to play their part as well. And some of the recommendations that we made was the production of a hospital travel plan. At the moment, the hospital has 3 or 4 different operations there from different NHS services. It's got to combine to get a travel plan. Parking strategies got to be resolved, and potentially using and it was a Gary's suggestion as well, which was using the revenue from the car parking to fund free staff travel, so tied in with the stations and stuff like that to meet the shift patterns. We need to discuss this with the transport body, the county council. Again, they've got great demands for funding for bus services. Active travel improvements. Going back, and I didn't point it out on the plan, but the hospital is bounded on the west side by the railway, and you have to walk almost a long way along the side of the railway and round till you get to the first crossing point of the railway, which increases the journey time by about 15 to 20 minutes if you to walk there. And so one of the suggestions is perhaps to shorten the route with a rail crossing, probably a footbridge with ramp. Costs some money, but then it is something that doesn't require a lot of maintenance. It is a connection into the hospital. behavioural change by the hospital. They could actually promote sustainable travel in their appointment letters. And then the additional demand generated by the Isle of Wight. There is actually a campaign on the Isle of Wight to improve the transport links. So getting from the ferry, running a bus service, for instance, from the ferry to the hospital, and to look at that. And then there's the rest of the business park and looking at demand there to look at how people travel to the rest of the business park. And whether there's demand there. There is an adjacent residential development, the opposite side of the railway. So you had a crossing of the railway. There's a potential then to serve the residential development. And then going back to the railway station, if the chairman of the Friends is continually doing the lottery, because I said that if he'd won that, then he could fund the railway station, low operational cost, but significant capital cost. Some of the issues we came up again, collecting survey data was a bit of a challenge. Mentioned that the current situation, the high level of car ownership in the area, relatively affluent area, people have cars, they've paid all the overheads for the cars, so they're going to use it. And whilst it's easily accessible by car, why would they use public transport, especially when it is so poor and infrequent? The hospital isn't particularly accessible by foot. I've mentioned the crossing of the railway, getting more connected to the town, and then on hospital appointments promoting sustainable transport. But you can't do that without the better bus services. So we need to sort of start talking about that. So hand in hand, promoting the bus services, putting constraints on the car parking. And I think that one of the things we probably could have done to enhance the survey was perhaps have produced a flyer or some text explaining the aspiration of the hospital to promote sustainable travel, circulate to the staff, and include an appointment letter so that people knew exactly where we were going or when they were confronted with the surveys. So that's really, in a nutshell, what it's about.
That's great. Thank you very much, Dave. That was an excellent summary of the project, and I'm sure we'll have some questions to follow on in a little bit's time. But for now, we'll move straight on to Heather Cullimore from Severnside CRP.
Thank you. Hold on 2 seconds and I'll try and present this in Teams. Is that loading on your screen?
I'll let you know when I see it, Heather.
Okay. No, it doesn't want to display the content that way, so I may just have to do it as a screen share, so please bear with me.
Just whilst we wait for Heather, if you do have any questions, feel free to put them into the question chat. Otherwise, we'll do hands up when Heather's finished.
Sorry to cut you there. Can you see that now?
All good. Yeah, perfect.
Oh, great. Thank you. So we used some integrated transport fund money to support an active travel survey and a study and survey around focusing on Yate Station in South Gloucestershire. Not everybody may be aware of where Yate is exactly on the patch. So this is our little map on the right hand side there of the routes that the Severnside Community Rail Partnership covers. Yate is in South Gloucestershire. It's sort of northeast suburb of Bristol, and it's a town sort of classed as a new town which had massive expansion during the 1970s. I don't know if anybody on the call is from Yate or has connections with Yate. I would describe it as perhaps not the most aesthetically inviting town, but it does have a population of just under 250,000, and it's quite well, it's quite an affluent area. There's very low levels of unemployment, and the majority of the people residing there are not necessarily employed from within the town, but would generally commute into Bristol or towards Birmingham for employment there. Few stats about the station itself there. It's now got a half-hourly service throughout the day as part of the Metro West improvements. It's partially staffed, but an interesting stat about Yate is that only 15% of households have no access to car or vans, versus 23% of England and Wales generally. So most people do drive or have access to a car. And therefore, there's a strong focus now around encouraging more sustainable and active travel. Quick overview of the station there. It's very difficult to photograph without a drone because it's staggered platforms. Unfortunately, we don't have a drone, so copied across there, first of all, the southbound platform, sorry, the northbound platform 1. And then it's a staggered road crossing over the bridge down to platform 2, which is also the car park area. And you will see there's a small amount of covered cycle parking there, although that's not terribly well utilised. I'm sorry, but I haven't got my notes because they're on my other format for presenting. So background to the survey. This came about because there had been several unsuccessful bids by some of the groups on this slide to apply to train operator and other sources of active travel funding to improve cycle facilities at the station. But they were being prepared and submitted in silo, and until we came together for this project, the groups around the table now hadn't really worked together. So that was the town council, who host a very active Yate and district transport forum, formerly the Friends of Yate Station, who over the years have been a very successful lobby group, particularly in securing increased capacity on their routes, and now have expanded their remit to cover all forms of sustainable transport very sensibly, but often were submitting applications by themselves without necessarily having consulted with with other relevant groups, including the local council and the very successful Yate Community Bike Hub. So when we were aware of a recent unsuccessful bid to a train operator CSIP fund, we thought perhaps it would be a good idea to have a look at those applications that had previously been unsuccessful and bring everybody together as a group and have a look at why things weren't working out so well. And generally, we found that the applications that have been submitted were for quite a high value and for infrastructure that might not be deliverable within a financial year bound application of funding process. So we sat down and worked out how to break things down a little bit, and quite often the bids were not necessarily underpinned by any firm data and more based on assumptions. So it was really time to commission some really more in-depth survey data. So thanks to the funding from the Integrated Sustainable Transport Fund and some match funding from Yate Town Council via their Livable Neighbourhoods project, we were able to commission a local organisation, Crystal Market Research, who were the chosen organisation to undertake the study. They were competitive price-wise, and they have experience of delivering surveys in the station environment on behalf of ourselves, Severnside Community Rail Partnership, and South Gloucestershire Council and the West of England Combined Authority. So they're very much a sort of trusted and approved organisation for this type of work. The brief that they were given was to prepare an evidence base that we can use to support future bids. and sort of 3 key areas there around safer cycling, more secure cycle parking, which seems to be the driver for a lot of the previous applications, and also looking for opportunities to promote active travel. It's one thing having the infrastructure, but we were well aware that will always be further work to do to increase awareness and to encourage that modal shift. We also discovered new layers of authorization around commissioning surveys with GWR, our train operator. So previously that was done by the station teams. They now have a head of customer data who was part of the approval process for the survey before we could be given permission for the survey company to be on site at the station. Surveys themselves took place in the spring in 2 formats. There were on-platform and off-platform surveys. The on-platform ones took place during a week that was identified as not being a school holiday or half term, a fairly typical week, and capturing Wednesday through to Saturday data, Wednesday being the key commuter day now, and Saturday to capture more of the weekend and leisure market. There were survey colleagues present with clipboards and hard paper copies for those who preferred, and there were also postcards given out with QR codes, and those were by far and away the more popular choice for people to complete the survey and do so via their smartphone, usually while they were on the train, as opposed to completing it on the station itself. There were also off-platform survey options, so off-station. Again, there was a QR code option with those, and those were promoted via social media, local press, and all the partner websites. Far less uptake than we were expecting there, which was quite a disappointing response, actually, particularly versus the station data, but it still did give us some valuable information. So just to give you some key findings today, I will make the actual survey and report available to anybody who might be interested in seeing it, but it does give us some quite clear data to inform the next steps. As we expected, knowing the car ownership in the area, and also knowing the congestion heading towards Bristol on a typical weekday, by far over half people are using cars to reach the station, followed by walking, and quite a small number cycling to the station at the moment. Bus even lower, so even less so. Only 7% of people reach the station by bus, which is quite interesting, and reflects the local authority recent bus cuts. And highlights the work to be done. Now, there is a new Westlink demand responsive service that the West of England Combined Authority launched last year, and there may be sort of far more opportunity around the development of that to encourage more journeys to the station via shared transport. In terms of walking and cycling, is interesting that it was predominantly male respondents who indicated that they use active travel to reach the station at the moment, and other forms of wheeling, and it showed a very low uptake from females, and that will also be useful when we look at the next steps, in particular, and what can be done in terms of behavioural change and encouraging modal shift. But 71 over 70% said that they did want to be more active, yet the majority are still getting in their car when there might be an opportunity to wheel or to walk to the station every day. The top 3 reasons for not cycling: concern around bikes getting stolen from the station, and this is a common theme throughout this and other work of this nature that we've been involved in as a community rail partnership. CCTV and Sheffield stands don't seem to be providing enough confidence for people to leave their bikes at most stations still. Also not owning a bike, a key reason, and that cycle routes to the station don't feel safe. So plenty of information there, and plenty that people can, the local cycling groups might be able to support once we've got the next steps determined and funded. There's always asked about an unexpected outcome, and I know Alex Peel is on the call, and she heard about this because we were doing calls together at the time that we were getting the survey responses in. When we put the survey out for responses on social media, we got literally hundreds of interactions around across the platforms around potholes leading up to the station. So if we'd had £1 for every comment about a pothole, we could probably fund some quite snazzy cycle lockers. So as for the next steps, well, the match funding that was provided by the livable neighbourhoods is to instruct consultants now to prepare an outline business case based on the data that we've got. There's a strong theme around more secure cycle parking and the desire for there to be cycle lockers, and there's strong evidence that there would be an increased uptake in cycling if the cycle parking was seen to be more secure. There are some redundant life expired lockers on the station, and those desperately need replacing. We're waiting for GWR have a new integrated transport manager starting in post, so he's going to be part of that consultation process as well, to make sure that everything that we're proposing would meet with the train operator requirements. The example that we've got on the left there is an organisation called Spoke Safe, which was brought to our attention by GWR Regional Development Manager. And this is an organisation that aren't quite nationwide, but are certainly expanding at the moment, who provided a 24-hour help service around their lockable cycle storage. So that's one avenue that we will be exploring. And we'll also be working closely with the Community Bike Hub to see how they can support modal shift, and by their very practical schemes, including Rusty Riders and women's cycling groups, to support people through their journey into sort of modal shift, hopefully. So thank you. And that's it from me.
Thank you very much, Heather. That's great, wonderful. So for some reason, Teams has all put you in cinema format, which I'm not sure that other people can see, which looks quite strange. So I'm just going to try and change that just for the purposes of the recording. So now I can see you all. It would be great if there was any questions from the floor. If you do have any, feel free to use the raise hand button on Teams, or just to put your hand up so I can see you, and I'll open the floor to questions. Rob, you look like you might be about to do one, and if you're not, come up with one anyway. There you go.
I put it in this newfangled question and answer thing on the right hand side.
Oh, okay. I'll need to open that then.
Now, I declare an interest because I'm from Dorchester, and Steve and I have talked about this already. But I think videos are great, and that video is absolutely fantastic, spot on. I'm just wondering what sort of where's it going, and is there at the moment, is there any way of measuring its impact? Because we can often produce great resources, but if nobody actually sees them, their impact it's not the fact the resource isn't great, it's the fact that it's hard to get these things out there. Is there any way we can measure the impact of it?
Yeah, Rob, I mean, it is difficult. It always is with videos and things like that, because we've got it on a YouTube platform and we've put it out on social media, so we can look at stats that we get from that. But what we did do as part of this funding application is employ a social media professional to try and put more content out, which he has been doing on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, to be able to try and get it out there more. It's it's one of those things, but sharing it with partners, putting it out on social media, and trying to expose it as much as possible. And hopefully, I mean, if you ever go on YouTube, I mean, I'm a bit of a YouTube addict actually, but when you go on there and you're interested in a certain thing, they just pop up similar, you know, in terms of when it looks at sustainable transport on the railway. So it's a difficult one. I will get stats back from the social media person. And yeah, and the other thing is that although this one's about just over 3 minutes, social media one's slightly less, is that people these days seem to want to watch all these little short TikTok videos, and you know it's competing with that really short, sharp messages and things like that, and so it's a difficult one. But we can only sort of try and create awareness and put exposure out there.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. I've got a question for Dave actually, and it's quite loaded, but I'd be interested to hear his response in front of everybody. I know that you were, for want of a better word, disappointed with the result of the survey. It gave you an answer that you weren't hoping for, I guess. How has that helped shape your plans going forward?
I think, firstly, we were dealing with it, although, as I mentioned at the start, I have a professional or had a professional interest in the railway. But firstly, having a consultant identify some of the issues in a formal report gives us a little bit of a tool to work on. And it's not just a bunch of volunteers mentioning it, because you get these kind of professional amateurs who have great ideas. One of them said, when I came up with the cost for the railway station, oh, I've got a mate who's a builder who could probably give us a price for doing it. So you get people like that with all great intent. So having a formal report is useful to have, but it's highlighted where the issues are. And I suppose it focuses the mind a little bit. So I've yet to do this presentation to effectively the hospital project board, and it is not widely available. So Alistair, please don't go talking widely about it. I know you're aware of it anyway, until I have presented it, because if anyone picked up the report, they may read it quite differently and say, well, there's no demand. Well, in actual fact, there's no demand because the area is quite affluent, and as Heather said, around Yate, there's a high percentage of car ownership, well above national average, and it's easy to jump in a car and get into the hospital where you can park for free. If they expand then their services, then the car parking will be a constraint. So that's one thing. Charges, we don't think that they will perhaps be as greater influence as you might think, but until we have a better bus service or better public transport service to the hospital, then things aren't going to change. And but you've got to have the two things hand in hand. The hospital have got to put constraints, and then we've got to have if you put the constraints in, you've got to have a better bus service. And the bus service is very poor at the moment. And that's one of our things we're going to tackle, is to try and encourage that. They don't have to be huge buses. You know, they can be sort of more hopper buses. They could be demand, but there's a discussion we've got to have. So it focuses the mind a little bit on how best to serve the hospital, but also the ferry. You know, the Isle of Wight, there's a campaign from the Isle of Wight for support for connectivity to the mainland. Well, again, there's no public transport really from the ferry to the hospital. And it's quite costly if you come across by car, but if you're a foot passenger, it's not too bad. So there's a lot of things that have been raised. So I think there's a lot of actions that we can take away from it, really. Whilst it was disappointing in the response, probably not surprising, really, because of the convenience of a car. I don't know whether that makes sense.
Yeah, it does, Dave. Thank you very much indeed. Steve has a question. Steve, you're on mute still, I'm afraid.
Someone's got to do it. Someone's got to do it. Yeah, just Dave. It's just that. Did you have involvement with Hampshire County Council and the Hampshire CRP?
We are. I think Alice would probably have a smile there. We have done this independent of the CRP, but I got the support of the stakeholders within the New Forest CRP. So the stakeholders within the New Forest CRP are SWR, Cross Country, New Forest Park Authority, White Link Ferries, Moorbus. So I got their support to the study. We haven't shared it with them at the moment. The CRP, as the management of the CRP, are aware of it, but we did that independent because of other circumstances with the CRP at the moment. Friends of the Lymington to Brockenhurst line were aware of it. Alistair here is chair of that, so they're kind of well aware of that study. So, you know, people are aware. We've had discussions with Network Rail. Network Rail even contacted me to ask how it was going. And so, yes, there is an interest in it. So we've had the support. People are waiting to find out the results of it, which I would like to present rather than just hand the report over. I don't know whether that answers your question, Steve.
Yeah, well, that's fine. Yeah, fine.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we're part of the New Forest CRP.
Yeah.
Yes, and there's a group there that are supportive of the study that we've done.
But ultimately, Dave, the local authority needs to be an active player.
Sorry, the local authority.
Yeah.
Well, we've got 2 councillors on the hospital project board. I'm I'm very good politically, but I say it as it is. I come from the north, although living in the New Forest. We have those 2 councillors on our board, and whilst they were quite happy to promote that something was happening and take a little bit of the credit for it, they weren't particularly good in initiating any support from the county council themselves. We have approached the county council on that and not found them particularly responsive. The district council were interested but not particularly responsive. But we need to take this to them and start that discussion. And that's where the bus company comes in. There is, there are 1 or 2 other avenues to tackle. We found out, and Gary gave me a link to NHS Sustainable Transport Person. As I mentioned, the Isle of Wight, there's a campaign there for better connectivity. And within that is connectivity for the NHS services as well. So a lot's come out of it. Going back to Gary's question, it's thrown up more, didn't get the answer we wanted, but it's thrown up more things and it's highlighted a number of issues. So it's been beneficial in that respect.
Great. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Dave. We've just got a couple more minutes left. Does anyone have any questions outstanding before I finish the meeting? Ben, I can see your hand up.
Hi, Gary. I'm sorry to disturb you. Just to ask you, please, if possible, could you let me have, the first point is an admin question. Could you let me have all the copies of the slides that are shown in today's presentation and subsequent presentations, please?
Of course, I'll try and make those available. I'll find out the best way to do that.
Lovely.
Ben, no problem.
Thank you. And my second point is my comment about the hospital in question. Addenbrooke's Hospital in Cambridge has at last got its rail station coming to it, which is Cambridge South. And I hope and I think this will be a game changer. And I think bus services are also going to be allowed to be joined up to the rail services at the station. So this is a good way of making people come in by public transport instead of using the car, which at the end of the day is, I think, a good idea for a hospital especially.
Great, Ben. Thanks. Well, we'll look forward to hearing more about that as things. When does the station open?
I think it's 2025.
Okay,
next
so
year.
plenty of time. Plenty of time for planning. One to keep your eye on there, Dave, as well.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ben. Rob's got his hand up, and we'll make this the last question.
It's not really a question, it's just thank you. Thanks to the three of you for fascinating reports. I find that really inspiring as well as informational. So I just wanted to say thank you very much. And thanks to Gary for setting it all up. We look forward to the next three. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rob. So yeah, like I said, I'll press stop recording now. Before I do, just to give a quick heads up for anyone watching this recording at a later date, that we do have this series running for the next 3 Thursdays. More information available on the Community Rail Network website. So thank you very much, Heather. Thank you very much, Dave. Thank you very much, Steve. Really interesting. Dave, you're waving your hand. One more thing to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to have a quick chat with Heather just before you sign everything off. So I don't know how you want to contact you.